Morning, everyone, and thank you for coming, especially the ones who hit the road today in this wonderful Basque summer day. I'm Cristina, I'm from Team Guillermo, and I'm going to talk to you about management of interstitial lung disease in systemic sclerosis and inflammatory myopathies. This can be a very intense topic, so I'm going to try to give you clear messages to use in your daily clinical practice. I'd like to start with systemic sclerosis, which is going to be the main topic of this session because we have more studies to comment. First of all, I think we all need to know that interstitial lung disease is nowadays the leading cause of death in systemic sclerosis. As you can see in this study published in 2010, over 1/3 of scleroderma-related deaths are due to ILD. But some of you may have noticed this. Sometimes interstitial lung disease can be mild, sometimes asymptomatic, and in some other patients it can be devastating. I think I better illustrate this with two clinical cases. The first one is Inma. She's a woman of 72 years old. She was diagnosed with limited systemic sclerosis in 2008. Based on Raynaud phenomenon, sclerodactylia, ANA positive, and interstitial lung disease. She was treated with 6 pulses of cyclophosphamide, and maintenance therapy with MMF was chosen. In 2008, when she was diagnosed, she had dyspnea class 2, and her pulmonary function test revealed 30% of forced vital capacity. Nowadays, in 2019, she has class 1 dyspnea, and her pulmonary function test revealed almost 60% of forced vital capacity. This is the CT scan when she was diagnosed, and the one on the right is the last CT scan. As you can see, they haven't changed so much. And now she's like a super nanny, always taking care of her grandchildren, and she lives a very healthy life. And on the other hand, we have Chechu. Chechu was a 55-year-old man. He was diagnosed of limited systemic sclerosis in 2004, based on Raynaud phenomenon, sclerodactylia, esophageal involvement, and interstitial lung disease with SCL70 positive antibodies. Again, he was treated with 6 pulses of cyclophosphamide and then switched to maintenance therapy with mycophenolate. When he was diagnosed, his pulmonary function test revealed forced vital capacity of almost 60%, and he always had class 1-2 dyspnea. But in March of last year, he told me that he felt worse with more cough and more dyspnea, so we repeated pulmonary function tests that were stable, but the CT scan revealed more extension of interstitial lung disease. So we decided to administer 6 more pulses of cyclophosphamide. In June, after cyclophosphamide, we did another CT scan that was worse than the one before. So we decided to add rituximab because the patient didn't feel better. After rituximab, in October of 2018, the CT scan was again worsening, and so he continued therapy with mycophenolate. He was evaluating for lung transplant, but he was still getting with more cough and more dyspnea. Finally, in January of this year, he goes inward because of fever and dyspnea. He was treated with pulses of prednisolone and broad-spectrum antibiotics, but with no improvement. He was rejected for urgent transplant, and finally he died in the intensive care unit. This is the first CT scan, and this is the last one. So which are the risk factors for disease progression? Some of them are very well known, being male, having anti-SCL70 antibodies, the pulmonary function testing at baseline. If they are worse, the evolution is going to be worse. And if the extension of fibrosis in the CT scan is high, also the evolution is going to be more devastating. But this is a study published this year that highlights other predictors of mortality in two of the main clinical trials regarding interstitial lung disease in systemic sclerosis, which are scleroderma lung study 1 and 2, that we will talk about these ones later. And they find that increased age and increased skin score are predictors of mortality, all-cause mortality being interstitial lung disease, the main cause of mortality. And also they found that the course of pulmonary function tests over the first 24 months, the first 2 years, predicts better survival than baseline measurements, which means that patients should continue immunosuppressive therapy for at least the first 2 years. This is what authors highlight. But also I think that this is an important finding to explain that the sooner we treat, the better. So which patients need to be screened for ILD? All patients at the diagnosis of systemic sclerosis, this is clear. Pulmonary function tests must be repeated annually, and at least a CT scan at the beginning of the follow-up must be done. But there are other methods that are beginning to be more and more important in interstitial lung disease screening. The first one is lung ultrasound. It has a high sensitivity. For example, in this study, you can see that none of the patients with a normal lung ultrasound were positive in the CT scan for interstitial lung disease. This is Warwick score, which is a score used, a semi-quantitative score used to analyze the CT scan. There are also other methods that are being more used, quantitative computed tomography, and also magnetic resonance. The main advantage of magnetic resonance is that there is no radiation exposure, and also that it can provide some functional information, but the extension of interstitial lung disease is not as good as in CT scans. And there are other methods of molecular imaging that are being used only in investigation. And now that we know who do we have to screen for ILD, we have to talk about who requires treatment. And every patient with a clinically meaningful ILD needs to be treated. Being clinically meaningful, almost all the patients, because clinically meaningful ILD is defined those who have mild to severe ILD in the CT scan, those who have worse pulmonary function tests than predicted, those with clinically meaningful decline in pulmonary function tests if they have one performed before the diagnosis of the disease, those with the saturation in the 6-minute walking test, and those with symptoms that can be due to ILD, which means all of them. So now that we know that all of the scleroderma patients they have to be screened for ILD, and all the patients with ILD have to be treated, how do we treat? Now is when I try to compare the studies that we have and the way we do it. I know your eyes are closed in this picture, but the girls are very good looking. So. These are the treatment options. Most of you know cyclophosphamide, mycophenolate, rituximab, tocilizumab, stem cell transplant, nintedanib, and non-pharmacological therapy. So let's start with cyclophosphamide. The main studies about cyclophosphamide in interstitial lung disease in scleroderma are these two. I talked about them before. Scleroderma lung study 1 and 2. The first one was published in 2006, and it compares cyclophosphamide orally with placebo during 1 year. And the second one was published in 2016 and compares cyclophosphamide orally with mycophenolate for 2 years. I mean, cyclophosphamide is administered for 1 year and mycophenolate for 2 years. And maybe when this is fixed, you can see that last year there was a publication that compared both arms of cyclophosphamide in the two different clinical trials. And the authors conclude that efficacy outcomes in both cyclophosphamide arms in scleroderma lung study 1 and 2 are very similar, and patients, again, with higher baseline forced vital capacity or DLCO are associated with improved course of pulmonary function test, which is the main outcome. And in both studies, they find that cyclophosphamide is not well tolerated and is associated with high number of adverse events, especially cytopenias. As you can see here, DLCO, the graphic on the right, doesn't change significantly in any of the cyclophosphamide arms in those studies, and there is an improvement of forced vital capacity in both arms that start worsening since month 21. The authors highlight that this is due to the fact that cyclophosphamide is only administered for 1 year. So this again contributes to enforce the theory that immunosuppressive therapy must last at least 2 years since the diagnosis. And are there any other publications with cyclophosphamide pulse therapy? Because the first trials were with oral cyclophosphamide. I found different studies with heterogeneous administration of cyclophosphamide. This one with almost 40 patients used cyclophosphamide weekly, 500 milligrams, and patients find improvement or stabilization about in 62 of the cases. They find also less adverse events than with oral cyclophosphamide. In this other one with 75 patients, cyclophosphamide is used in monthly pulses, and again they find improvement in almost 20% of the patient and stabilization in almost 60% after 12 months of therapy, and they again insist on lower adverse events, less adverse events than with oral cyclophosphamide. So, take-home messages with cyclophosphamide. You have to know that it is effective and is well demonstrated to improve, but mostly to stabilize lung function. Pulses are better tolerated than oral doses, and the sooner we treat, the better. And this goes with every immunosuppressive therapy we choose. And immunosuppressive therapy must be continued in order not to lose the cyclophosphamide effect. Mycophenolate mofetil has been emerged as an alternative therapy for ILD in the last more or less 3 years. And many studies have demonstrated that it may prevent progression in ILD, but again, the main study was Scleroderma Lung Study 2. It was compared with cyclophosphamide, and they found no significant difference in the main outcome, which is the course of forced vital capacity. The LCO didn't improve in any of the arms, and again we find that forced vital capacity increased until month 21, that starts again decreasing because of the loss of effect of immunosuppressive therapy. They find less leukopenia and similar number of infection, and is better tolerated than cyclophosphamide because time to withdraw the medication is shorter with cyclophosphamide. And now we switch to biologic therapy. And of course, we have to talk about rituximab because we have many retrospective studies with few patients and some other case report that have demonstrated that rituximab is also efficient in stabilization of pulmonary disease. This is the first control trial that randomized 30 patients to cyclophosphamide and 30 patients to rituximab, and they find an improvement, significant improvement of forced vital capacity in the group of rituximab that is not found in the group of cyclophosphamide after 6 months. Regarding adverse events in this study, they don't find difference between infections among the two groups, but they find less leukopenia in the rituximab group. And this study, which is the one with more patients, was published last year. It includes, it's a prospective study that includes 154 patients treated with rituximab, patients with scleroderma, most of them because of the lung and some other for the skin. The median follow-up is 2 years, which is quite long, and they compared with those patients with more than 9,000 non-treated patients. They found no significant changes in pulmonary function tests between patients treated with rituximab and patients treated with other immunosuppressive therapy. But they insist that these are real patients, it's not a clinical trial, and patients with rituximab have higher activity and more severity at baseline, which can be the reason why they don't find difference in the pulmonary function tests. Concomitant use of mycophenolate with rituximab showed a trend for better outcomes in forced vital capacity. And tocilizumab has only been studied in this trial, but changes in pulmonary function tests were the secondary endpoint. What they find, comparing to placebo, is that fewer patients in the tocilizumab group. As you can see, the graphic above is in 24 weeks, and the one below is after 48 weeks. The group of tocilizumab had less decline in forced vital capacity than group of placebo. The similar rate of the rate of adverse events is similar, but they found more infections with tocilizumab. This is the continuation of that trial. All the patients continue 1 year longer with tocilizumab, and they didn't find no worsening in any of the patients regarding forced vital capacity. So, regarding biological therapy, what we have to have clear is that rituximab has better results than cyclophosphamide when used as first-line therapy. It has a good safety profile, and combination with mycophenolate should be considered because it has a trend of better outcomes in the study mentioned before. And tocilizumab could contribute to stabilize lung function, but more studies are needed because it was studied as a secondary outcome in the clinical trial that we talk about. And this is another treatment that we should be aware about, is the autologous hematopoietic stem cell transplant. In 2 years ago, the EULAR guideline for treatment of scleroderma recommended this treatment for progressive scleroderma patients with risk of organ damage. What it does is an immunoablative effect on T cells, and this allows complete regeneration of non-autoimmune cells in bone marrow. So this study is the systematic review that includes 3 clinical trials and 1 retrospective comparative study with scleroderma patients. The primary outcome is all-cause mortality, and they find that stem cell transplant reduced significantly all-cause mortality. When they analyze pulmonary function, they can only evaluate 2 of the 3 clinical trials, but they find that this technique significantly improves forced vital capacity, total lung capacity, and DLCO. But the risk of treatment-related mortality is, of course, much higher in the patients treated with this technique due to cardiotoxicity and to infections, because it requires an induction therapy with high doses of, very, very high doses of cyclophosphamide. So when talking about this treatment, we have to compare the need of using it due to the severity of the disease and refractory to other immunosuppressive therapy and the risk of treatment-related mortality. So nowadays more studies are needed to select better timing, maybe a subgroup of patients that can benefit more of this technique. Optimal cardiac screening to avoid cardiotoxicity as much as we can, and optimal conditioning regimens to avoid infection as much as we can. And finally, this is the newest of the newest. This was published this year. It's a clinical trial about nintedanib, which is a therapy authorized in pulmonary idiopathic fibrosis, but this is a clinical trial analyzing scleroderma patients. They randomized 576 patients for nintedanib or for placebo during 52 weeks, and patients have to have lung fibrosis affecting at least 10% of the CT scan and no pulmonary hypertension. What they find is that the rate of pulmonary forced vital capacity was lower, the decrease was lower in the nintedanib group, significantly lower. Patients could be treated with other immunosuppressive therapy, and almost 50% of the patients included are treated with methotrexate or mycophenolate. Regarding adverse events, diarrhea is much more common in nintedanib group, which is what was found also in the trial analyzing this therapy for fibrosis, pulmonary fibrosis, but is an adverse event that is getting better and better tolerated once we continue with the treatment. They find more or less the similar forced vital capacity decline as in the study, in the IMPULSIS trial, which is the study of pulmonary fibrosis. they cannot find changes in skin or quality of life, and the safety profile is also similar to the Impulsys trial. So this could be an option for patients who have a lot of fibrosis instead of ground glass opacities. And apart from all the studies, I think it's very important, at least for me, to don't forget about non-pharmacological therapies, which are oxygen when needed, control esophageal reflux, because it can worsen pulmonary function tests and dyspnea, quit smoking, and physical therapy when possible. And now that you are very tired of many studies, I'd like to explain how we treat these patients. Bad timing. So first of all, we use induction with cyclophosphamide, 6 pulses every other week of 500 milligrams, always administered with pulses of methylprednisolone. And then we perform a CT scan. If we find improvement or stabilization, we switch to maintenance therapy with almost always with mycophenolate. Maybe some cases with azathioprine, but there are not many patients with that, for at least 3-5 years. And if we find worsening in the CT scan, we consider more pulses of cyclophosphamide or switching to rituximab. After preparing this session, I like to correct myself. So I think that we should also perform pulmonary function tests immediately after the induction therapy, because it's also good to know if pulmonary function tests have changed, not only CT scan. And maybe if we find that everything is being worse and worse even after induction therapy with the first 6 pulses, we should switch directly to rituximab, given that in the clinical trial that I mentioned before, it had better results than cyclophosphamide. And again, when we find a lot of fibrosis instead of ground glass opacities, maybe we should consider nintedanib as a therapy option, now that we know that the clinical trial has good results. And now I switch to inflammatory myopathies. I'm not going to talk about this so long, but there are some interesting topics that I'd like to mention. First of all, the better knowledge of myositis-specific antibodies. This has let the clinics know better who to treat for interstitial lung disease and who to screen for interstitial lung disease, because some myositis-specific antibodies give a higher risk of interstitial lung disease, and those ones are antisynthetase antibodies. You know very well Jo-1, but there are also PL7 and PN12 and other more, but those 3 are the most common ones. And PL7 and PL12 give poor prognosis, worse prognosis than anti-Jo-1 patient. And also anti-MDA5 antibody, which is associated with hyperamyopathic dermatomyositis that can provide severe and acute ILD, especially in patients of Asian background. Not so much in European and American patients. For example, there is a cohort of MDA5 positive patients, 23 patients, John Hopkins cohort, and they only found severe ILD in 25% of them. And also we have to know that anti-Ro, even that is not a specific antibody but an associated antibody, it provides worse prognosis when it's associated with Jo-1 antibody, giving more severe ILD and less responsive to treatment. So I decided to divide what I'm going to talk to you about therapy, first of all with antisynthetase syndrome and then with anti-MDA5 positive dermatomyositis. In antisynthetase syndrome, there are no clinical trials comparing immunosuppressive drugs, but now we know that therapy with corticosteroids alone is not recommended. And this is very simple. For me, it's like something crazy, treated this with only corticosteroids. But it wasn't until 2007 that this study was published that compared patients treated only with corticosteroids and patients treated since the beginning with corticosteroids and immunosuppressive therapy, and mortality was much higher in the group of the patients treated only with corticosteroids. So nowadays it is clear that we don't have to do this. And the options available are the ones that we know, but with special interest in anti-calcineurin inhibitors and rituximab. Cyclophosphamide has been used in many studies in anti-synthetase syndrome. This one, as you can see here, is a systematic review that includes 12 articles, 11 of them with cyclophosphamide use in pulses. The duration of therapy is until 1 year, and they find an improvement of pulmonary function tests in almost 60% of the patients. And also they find that CT scan improves in more than 60% of the patients. But still, many patients died, and most of the deaths due to diffuse alveolar damage. When cyclophosphamide is compared to other immunosuppressive therapy, for example, in this study that there is a comparison with azathioprine and mycophenolate, they didn't find significant difference in pulmonary function tests among different immunosuppressive therapy. As you can see, this is the change that they find after 6 months and after 12 months, which is more or less a stabilization more than improvement. And now we switch to anti-calcineurin inhibitors. In the last 5 years, there are more studies highlighting the role of this therapy in interstitial lung disease in anti-synthetase syndrome. This is a Spanish study with 15 patients, and when they analyze a prospective study, when they analyze the evolution of pulmonary function tests, they find that in 80% of the patients, pulmonary function improve or stabilize. And all of the patients that use anti-calcineurin inhibitors as first-line therapy improve. And rituximab has been studied in many retrospective studies in anti-synthetase syndrome. This is a study with 25 patients during 1 year of follow-up, and they find a median increase of 25% of forced vital capacity, and also a reduction in fibrosis in the CT scan. All the patients with rituximab have concomitant immunosuppressive therapy, and still they find 6 deaths due to infections. And this is the phase 2 trial in anti-synthetase syndrome with rituximab. Again, they find in 10 patients, 4 stabilize and 5 improve with rituximab therapy. And finally, anti-MDA5 positive associated ILD, there are some clinical studies, most of them case reports, that have used a very heterogeneous therapy, rituximab, immunoglobulins, high doses of methylprednisolone, most of them with good response to rituximab. One of them used tofacitinib, which is similar to baricitinib mentioned before, and some other plasmapheresis. And again, this is the way we do it. We use, our scheme is very similar to the scleroderma scheme. We use an induction with cyclophosphamide, then we perform with methylprednisolone pulses, we perform a CT scan. When we find improvement or stabilization, we switch to maintenance therapy this time with mycophenolate associated to anti-calcineurin inhibitors mostly, and if worsening, we consider more pulses or rituximab, most of the time rituximab. If anti-MDA5 case is found, I'll suggest rituximab. In these patients, we still don't have to forget about non-pharmacological therapies that are still important, especially don't forget about esophageal reflux, with many patients with anti-synthetase syndrome have, and physical therapy when it's possible. And that's all. Thank you.